fact of existence of the mobile phone lays a certain foundation for modern life. It's a fact. Much of our modern life is organised around the fact that certain new means of communication exist in most of our pockets at this moment. Much of the way in which we live our lives today, in terms of its discipline and structure, is founded around the fact that we have a certain means of communication in our pockets. Many people go home and they will use, I think on average in the United States, for example, on average, the internet population, which constitutes 90% of the population of the United States, spend an average of 3 hours a day on the internet. That simple fact of the way in which we live and organise allows us to analyse how we can reshape the way in which we live. The internet allows us not only to assess what exists in the world in a way in which even 20 years ago was impossible for the majority of the population of this planet, and thereby to conceptualize on a global scale how the planet and its resources and human energy and ability can be reorganized in order to reshape the world to serve the interests of the majority of the population through democratic control and public ownership of key core resources which we require in order to satisfy human wants, human needs, and overcome crises in society that are leading to destructive consequences for the fate of the majority of man or much of mankind. And so you have to relate to what exists, to what level we are at in society.
Can I give you 200 Swedish krona?
You certainly can. It's not my bag though.
Isn't it?
There was an article, if any of you get a chance to go to the library or you've got the money to buy The Economist this week, get a copy of The Economist this week. Very interesting article, because the centre pages have got a special review, and it's
Will
called...
that be online, The Economist?
No, nowadays they don't put it online. It's called a special report on managing information, and it's called Big Data. And it's a very interesting discussion there, because what they're describing here is the new process of development of this mass of information being circulated around the world, and companies and organizations utilizing that data in order to intervene in society. One, perhaps to make profits. Two, perhaps to reorganize certain elements of the way in which we live better. Three, perhaps to transform the way in which we live in terms of healthcare, welfare, education, planning of corporate operations. But of course, the consequence of it is that can also be applied to bringing about transformation of society. For example, one of the reasons why I was this week's Economist, one of the reasons why I was mistreated in the Marxist movement was because I took up the idea consistently that instead of simply propagating ideas to people, for example, as our friend here does with Cuban newspapers, the tendency is, for example, in the communist movement, because Lenin had a newspaper, which he in 1903 in London, he said, you must build your organization around a network of correspondents around the world who will organize to produce and disseminate a newspaper, sell it to the workers in the factories, gain influence within the working class, and then this movement that you can create around a newspaper, what they call their party, the Bolshevik movement within the Russian Social Democratic Labour Party, this party based around a newspaper would be able to intellectually and politically organise the working class to take power. Now, the fact of the matter is, nowadays we live in a modern world where we have modern means of communication. A video camera on a mobile phone, a video camera just here, the ability to transmit this data both live and by streaming video at a later stage across the entire planet. And that fundamental fact means that the mechanisms of domination which used to control society and still do control society are amendable, defeatable, adjustable and overthrowable. For example, the idea that the BBC or that CNN or what used to be the Times newspaper, or the Financial Times, that these newspaper, or the Sun newspaper, that these organs of capitalist propaganda to manipulate the minds of the masses, as Noam Chomsky used to say, to manufacture consent. These instruments that used to be the core instruments for controlling the psychological state of the masses and reproducing the mentality of subordination no longer are as relevant to the modern world and to the future world as they were only in recent times. And thereby what happens is that when people are confronted with these new means of communication, sometimes it not only undermines the ruling classes. For example, you might remember years ago when the Rodney King video came out that people had beaten up this black guy in Los Angeles and someone had videoed it. That was enough to cause a riot. There was a recent article in the journal. There was a recent article in the journal China Security, in which a senior academic in the Communist Party by the name of I can't remember his name. It might come to me in a bit. Wrote an article about recent riots and demonstrations in China. And the key characteristic of these riots and demonstrations was that they were organized by either email or mobile phone. The same phenomena was seen in Iran only last year. That what you're seeing is that as human beings come into greater and greater intercommunication, so you will also see the emergence of new movements and new capacities to combine and organize on a world scale to challenge the existing power of the capitalist class.
You mean you are very optimistic of the future?
It's not that I'm very optimistic about the future. I'm simply describing how methods can be used to create channels of communication which are able to break down much of the power of capitalism that it has got, for example, in the information sphere. And that many people seem to think, and have traditionally thought, well, we can't do anything about it. The mass media is so strong. This type of argument is a stock in trade argument of cynical leftists.